Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Here today to talk about Sim Update 15, which is due out tomorrow, which is May 7th. And we're going to talk about some things to expect, my experiences with it as a beta tester, and just overall what I think is going to happen. And my first prediction is it is not going to be released tomorrow. There is a serious issue on Xbox, a serious stability issue on Xbox that doesn't allow pretty much the use of any third party aircraft. And it's been an issue since the most recent beta release about a week ago or so. They haven't said anything about it in terms of it impacting the release date, but that's fairly typical of Asobo. They don't really communicate much of anything in terms of those types of things. So my first prediction is that this is not going to come out tomorrow, and we'll go now, I guess, into some general observations about Sim Update 15. Number one, Sim Update 15 should be very smooth. I would expect that for most of you, the performance is going to be very, very good. Early beta versions were unstable, but really since probably the third or fourth beta release, and there's been, I don't know, six, seven, eight of them over the past, 2 months that this beta's been running. After the initial few, the beta has been very stable. Performance has been very good. I generally don't have performance issues anyway, but in the early beta release, the first one or two, it was unstable. I didn't have good performance, and there were a lot of crashes to desktop. And I actually left the beta for about 2 weeks and got back in it after a better release came out. So it's very stable. It's very smooth. Performance is good. I've even noticed in places that I normally fly in, in the 737 or the ATR, bigger airports, that things are very good. And I actually did a video a week ago or so, maybe a week and a half ago, and I did some filming in Chicago, the Project Lasso or Process Lasso video, and I did some filming in Chicago International Airport, and I was actually really surprised at how good the performance was in the stock beta release. So pretty much, I think the performance is going to be very good. The interesting things are when we get to what we're looking at here. Now, the general aircraft, the big thing is there's two things, right? And I don't think they really enumerated this very well. You see here ground contact resolution improvements. Now, what is that supposed to mean? I mean, to me, resolution means, the visual look of it. How I don't know how you can improve how the ground contact looks, but there's a couple things. More accurate ground contact model, optional soft ground collision model for tires, flexible gears, enabled new soft gears on C-172 and Cabri, and new high accuracy physics to enable vibrations and micro movements. Now, let's break this down a little bit. So, first of all, there has been a misconception throughout this beta that the ground contact model and the soft ground collision model for the tires and the flexible gears are the same thing. They are not the same thing. The ground contact model is better for all aircraft in Sim Update 15. And you will notice it. You have to have feet of lead not to notice it. If you've got rudder pedals that you use in the ATR, in the Islander, which I fly a lot, in the 737 that I fly a lot, the ground contact model is much better. And what do I mean by the ground contact model? What I mean is the ability to control the aircraft on the ground. So, in other words, taxiing and in particular dealing with crosswinds in takeoffs and landings is much, much different in Sim Update 15. There is much less of, spending half your takeoff run dancing on the rudder pedals, going back and forth because the airplane is so difficult to control. It's much, much easier to control all airplanes in Sim Update 15. And this has opened up one of the things that I've gotten into more recently, which is flying tail draggers. Flying tail draggers, I've never even bothered to try in Microsoft Flight Simulator up until now because the ground contact model is so poor that even a tricycle gear airplane is very difficult to control, particularly in crosswinds. And so there's really no point in trying to fly tail draggers because they would be nigh on impossible to control. Well, Sim Update 15 changes that. Sim Update 15 is much, much better in terms of ground handling of the aircraft, and you guys will notice that for sure. I think this optional soft ground collision model for tires and the flexible gears is, as we talked about in one of the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 previews, there's give now in the tires. As you know, with real tires, they compress. If you see an airplane in particular sitting on the ground, 172 Cherokee, that sort of airplane, Bonanza, whatever, the tires they give. They have flexibility. They have flexibility, and they give. And this obviously has an impact on how they interact with the ground. This was not modeled in Flight Sim 2020. This is going to be modeled in Flight Sim 2024, and they've backported that into Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. Why do they call it optional? So the next statement is that they enabled the soft gears on the 172 and the Cabri. The 172 has this new flexible gear and tire give model, and it's optional for the rest of the aircraft because it's a code that, in theory, developers will be able to add to their config files very easily to enable this feature on other aircraft. So this is separate from the ground contact model that we were talking about before that affects all airplanes. This affects directly the tires and the gears. And again, this is something that developers can hopefully add very easily to their aircraft. And then the last thing is the new high accuracy physics system to enable vibrations and micro movements. If you've ever been in a real airplane, particularly an older, smaller airplane, 172, 152, 182, etc., they vibrate, they jitter, when you've got the engine running, and especially if you're doing a run up in those planes, it's very noticeable how much vibration goes on. And so those things are now enabled in Microsoft's Flight Simulator 2020. Is this a huge difference? Not really for me. So those are the things that they specifically talked about that I think are going to be very, very important and are going to be very, very impactful. As you can see, they've also done, a host of changes and updates to other aircraft, to the SDK. They've fixed a lot of crashes, so that's going to be a good thing for a lot of people. The next thing I think people are going to notice is that the weather seems to be much, much better. The live weather seems to be a whole lot better in Sim Update 15. I did a video demonstrating the tail dragger, and I was really, really surprised by how good the weather is. You can see this low kind of mist, these kind of low hanging, undefined clouds. And I've noticed that actually in several instances of flying throughout the Caribbean in Sim Update 15 in the beta. A lot of localized showers, which is a really interesting phenomenon, which is not something I remember seeing that much before. That is definitely quite prevalent in Sim Update 15 beta, so I think that's going to be really interesting to see what people think of the weather. I think it's much improved. And of course, they've done work on the water masking. That has been, to my knowledge, largely fixed. I've done a lot of flying around the islands lately. And as you can see, again, really, really good improvements in the weather. So the last point worth making here is, why is this sim update so important? And the reason, of course, why this sim update is so important is because this is the last sim update we are getting in 2024. So whatever we get here, absent any hot fix, which they're not typically known to do, this is what we're going to be dealing with for the next, 7 months at least. And you have to figure that after this sim update, the reality is going to be that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is going to come out sometime in the fall. And Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, clearly at that point, will be on the back burner. The most I think we can expect once Flight Simulator 2024 comes out is bug fixes and things like that. They may do some backporting of features that they bring to 2024, but really, there's a decent chance that this is really it. That this is what we're going to have for the next, for the foreseeable future. And is that a bad thing? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I think this is once this update comes out, if it's stable, if it's as expected and as I've experienced it, I think it's a very good, very, very good simulator. And for those of you who choose to stay in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, I know a lot of people are skeptical about 24 and don't necessarily have the most positive impressions of Asobo, whether I agree with them or not. Surely a lot of people are going to stick with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. And if you choose to do so, I think you're going to be happy. I think this is a very, very good simulator at this point. And so we shall see. But again, my prediction is this is not going to come out tomorrow. Do I hope to be proven wrong? Not really sure on that one, to be honest, because if it comes out with really bad stability issues like it has right now on Xbox, then that's not going to make it's not going to make a lot of people happy. Let's put it that way. So we'll see what happens, but I think overall there's a lot to look forward to, and we shall see. And on that note, I will leave you guys, and I will watch and see what happens, see what we get tomorrow, see if we get any announcement today. And I hope you guys are doing well. I would appreciate your comments and feedback in the comment section below, and I wish everybody well.